My guest today is Andrej Persolja. Andrej is the founder of Tangible Growth at nailyourpositioning.com. He is a positioning strategist who works with SaaS founders to help them build product market fit and unlock the next stage of growth. He says he's a loud extrovert in a group of close friends, but he's a shy introvert when it comes to meeting new people. So in today's talk, Andrej talks about the definition of positioning versus some other similar marketing terms that it's often confused with, the impact of positioning on a company, and some of the major mistakes to avoid in your positioning. Let's dive right in. So Andrej, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I know I listened to your podcast for a while now, and I enjoyed it. The talk that you had, I think it was with Luigi, about the sales messages and the generic sales messages. And it just, it hit home because it's a lot of what I preach on LinkedIn. So, generic is bad and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, I'm glad. Yeah. You had a chance to listen to some of the interviews. If you did, you probably know I haven't actually targeted positioning yet. So this is why I'm excited to have you on, because I've covered branding and marketing in general and all those things. So can you start with a little bit of background about what positioning is, how it relates to the different aspects of marketing, and is it related to brand? How is it related to brand?
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because when I stumbled across positioning, I never heard about it before, right? It's not taught in business schools. It's not taught in startup programs. And yet for us and for the startups I work with, it brings results, right? So why is it that it's uncharted? And that's what I was asking myself when I started in positioning. And the way I see it, it's part of the branding process. Usually, that's why maybe it's not so much thought about as being a part of the building your business, but it's about building your brand. And I think that this is sort of kind of wrong. I don't want to say exactly wrong, but the branding process deals with emotions, with the intangible, with the fonts and the colors, and what kind of design do we need to evoke emotions and so on. And that part is important when you're building a brand. That's definitely important. But positioning is sort of the opposite of that. It's the logical part of branding, and it's the tangible part, if you will. And they both sort of have to work together. But because positioning is often done by branding specialists, I think it's sort of been categorized as the same thing, as part of the branding process, whereas in truth, it has nothing really to do with the brand. It's completely legit choice to not build a brand, but you still need to have your position sorted out, right? So you could be you could be an e-commerce, but still have a position on the market without building a brand. So yeah, sort of it's put out there with the branding, but I sort of see it like this yin and yang. They have to work together, like the branding process and the positioning process. And actually, this is where I try to be different, because the branding process is, because it speaks to emotions, it speaks to, your feelings. And so I try to be different because positioning can actually bring tangible results. And I try to be as tangible as possible. I try to measure positioning, even though it's difficult, but I try to make it as tangible as possible. And this is actually my differentiation on the market.
Okay. I like that. It's almost like a left brain, right brain thing. It's how you describe it, because right brain would be like the creative part, the colors, and like you said, the emotional part. And what's interesting too is that, research shows that we make decisions based on emotion, but then we justify it on logic. So how would you explain positioning to somebody who doesn't even know what it is?
Positioning is about how you present your product or your service, whatever you're selling, your brand, so that customers understand it. So I like April Dunford's definition that positioning is the context around what you're selling. So the context around the product, the context around your service. The thing is that our brain likes to categorize stuff, right? So whenever we see something new, like a new product, a new service, it needs to understand the context of that product. And are we now talking about a new TV, a new phone, a new blog website? What are we even define the frame that we're working within? And this is usually actually something that I see people and companies actually go wrong with it, because companies tend to experiment with the market category. So they try to experiment with defining who they are. And they're trying to create new categories. Like, we're going to be the leaders in something that doesn't exist yet. So we're going to create a smart clock or whatever. And then they come up with, okay, so now we have a smart clock, and the customers are like, what is that? I don't get it. And then the company wonders for where it all went wrong. We don't have conversions. We have people aren't clicking on our ads. And so, no, you're just being too creative. You're making a clock with some additional features. Just say it like it is. Don't try to invent stuff when positioning your content. The message needs to be clear. Otherwise, it's not understood.
Is it also partly that instead of talking to your customers first, or potential customers, and then seeing where there is a need in the marketplace versus just coming up with some idea you think is brilliant and it doesn't make any sense? Like, no one's asked for that. No one's asked for a clock that, it does.
Yeah.
Like, is that part of it as well?
I guess. So I think, especially in startups, there is like this tendency to create a product first and then place it onto the market. Whereas in whole truth, the opposite should be true every single time. So, start with the problem, start with the customer problem. Like, what's the problem? What's the pain that the customer has, and how can we solve it? And then the solution is your product. Because like people or entrepreneurs are so crazy with the ideas. We tend to have ideas, like a lot of ideas, and they're good ideas. I'm not saying they're bad, but the issue is we started with the ideas, we produce the products, we do the products, we iterate the products, we add features and so on. But we never ask ourselves, will this work in the real world? And actually, this is part of my this week's newsletter. It was actually just an example that came to mind now. So I have this example in this week's newsletter where Lexus, the Japanese manufacturer of cars, made the perfect car, right? And it was the Lexus LFA. And it was perfect to drive. It had the best sound, the best looks and everything. And it was the best car that they could produce that nobody ever bought. Or maybe I think 400 people bought it because nobody actually wanted to spend $500,000 on a Lexus where you could have a Ferrari at half the price, a Lamborghini at half the price, a Nissan GTR that drives just the same at $75,000. And so it's the same when you're building a company. You're trying to perfect the product, but nobody wants a perfect product. We want products that saves us our problems, or it's a solution to our problem, right? We don't want perfection. We just want a solution. And that's, I think, where companies go wrong.
Yeah. And that brings me to my next question. So, what happens? Well, how does positioning affect companies? So you sort of started down that road, but what is it that, hang on one second, because we're going to have to edit this. I have a cat that is under my desk and I'm trying to ignore her, but she is.
No, but you should leave this in the podcast.
Yeah, I will. She never does that. She never does that.
No, but we just gained about 300 followers, you and I. So you should just leave it in. Just leave the cat in.
Yeah, it's just this. Good. She always sleeps through all my interviews. For some reason today, she's under, her head is poking through my desk and she's doing, and she never does that. So I don't know what's happening. But anyway,
maybe it's my energy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But
good.
Yeah. So what is it that goes? How does positioning affect the company? Was my question.
Yeah. So I think the best analogy that I came up with was that strong positioning feels sort of like having wind in your sails pushing you forward, like an invisible force pushing you forward, whereas poor positioning is like an anchor holding you back. And, you keep working and you keep, trying and changing your approach and changing the messaging, testing the landing pages, testing the channels, but nothing seems to be working. And because it's people just don't respond to your product. And it's difficult because poor positioning symptoms actually hide in marketing and sales KPIs. So you're not going to see that you have a positioning problem directly. You're going to see that you have poor conversion rates or poor sales and people not responding to your cold emails or to your marketing materials. You have long sales cycles. These are all things that are difficult to define. So basically you see them as a marketing, as a sales problem. So at the end of the year, we're not going to reach our target. Why is that? Well, we had poor leads, or we didn't even have enough leads, or our cold outreach didn't work. But you're not going to see positioning written somewhere like you have poor positioning. You have to figure that out because it hides as a marketing or as a sales problem. And actually, if I wanted to make my job easier, if I was like a freelance copywriter, I would just try to work with companies that have their positioning figured out, because having your positioning nailed just makes the job, so much easier. So that would be actually my advice for copywriters. Just find companies that have their positioning figured out.
A lot of times the ones that don't, well, it's from everything you just said, they don't even know it, right? How do you know? Like how, if it's hides, in sales, and what is it that should make you test it or at least look at positioning as a problem?
Yeah. So the issue is actually how we think about positioning and how we think about strategies in general, because positioning is a strategy. And at the end of so when you do a strategy, what you get at the end is a hypothesis, right? So it's a theory. So for example, before we had an example with the Lexus LFA, and their theory was that if we build a perfect car, people will actually buy it. And now we have a theory. Now we have an assumption. And what you can do right now is option A, you can design and build that car, or option B, you can test if that's true. And what companies do is choose option A, and that's exactly what Lexus did, right? So basically they spent millions and millions of dollars and 10 years of time and effort and built that car, and then nobody bought it, right? And actually what we should do is do option B. So test if that's true and do that all the time, because a strategy is just basically making an informed decision when some new data presents at your doorstep, right? And it's just making that decision. We can either go A or B or maybe C, and that's it. And so what you should do is constantly work on your positioning. Never even stop. So basically you have every company wants to improve their product market fit, right? It's the golden stuff that you can the golden prize that you get at the end of the game. And because once you achieve product market fit, you can scale. And so if we break this down, right? If we break product market fit down, on one hand, you have a product, and we all know product. So we know how to build it. We know how to define it. We know how to iterate it. We know how to improve it. We can add features to it and so on. It's something tangible. It's physical. We understand it. Even if it's a service, we can still make it tangible by showing our process in Miro-board or something like that. But anyway, we understand the product. But then you have the second part, which is the market fit. And that's basically positioning. So how are you presenting the product? And entrepreneurs are really quick to iterate the product, but they forget about the market fit. And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to basically do the same with the market fit part, so the positioning part. So I try to growth hack positioning, if you will. So you iterate positioning the same way you iterate your product. And so you develop it as you go along. So you add a new feature, you check how that affects your new positioning. You change your service, you add something to your offer, and then you figure out how does that affect my positioning. So for example, I am a positioning guy. I'm a positioning strategist. If I now add marketing services or go-to-market strategies to my service, what does that make with my positioning? because I now have a problem. I'm no longer a positioning guy because I do marketing strategies as well, right? And so we need to think about this when we're making strategic decisions. So how do you know? You shouldn't ever you should iterate your positioning all the time. So just think about, how do my customers see me? How do they perceive me? What's my perceived value?
Okay. So is it something, it sounds like something that shouldn't really change. Is that like throughout time? Like when I do value proposition analysis for my clients, I tell them that if your product changes, your value prop's going to change. So you should always be aware of that. Is that like that with positioning, or is it sounds like it's more of a major thing. Like I see positioning from what you're describing as almost like the backbone of everything else that you do. What will cause it to change, if anything?
Yeah, so positioning is what I like to call everything we do before we come up with the marketing plan and our messaging as well. Because it's the basis of every marketing strategy, basically. What would make it change? If you wanted to penetrate a new market, so let's say that you have a product and you want to, so in the beginning, you started with selling that product to solopreneurs, right? To solo businesses. And you only worked with them. And so your positioning was really clear. We have this service, or we have this product for these people, and that's it. Or we help them achieve this goal, and that's it. And then you wanted to expand your market. So now we work with solo brands as well as enterprise brands or small companies or something like that. And now your positioning changes. So now you have to figure out the values that you give to solo brands and the values that you give to small, medium companies, and find a common denominator, and that changes your positioning. But then you have the main, so I'm guessing your unique value proposition, your promise to the client will still stay the same, because what are you trying to achieve? You're still trying to help them achieve the same goal. It's just a different audience. And because it's a different audience, different values come into play. And then basically you have two choices. You either position yourself under an umbrella term. So basically that means that you join both target audiences and communicate with them at the same time, which sometimes works, but most likely comes to, it ends up in generic messaging. Or you can have two positions, which is also quite often the case in B2B marketing, because you don't have one buyer at the end of the day. You have a buying committee. You have the marketing, the vice president of marketing, the CEO, the product guy, the sales manager. So you need to convince all of them. But these people have different values. So you need to position your product differently for each and every one of them. So what happens is at the meetings, you have basically different, you're using different positions based on who you're talking to at the meeting, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, what comes to mind is I used to follow a makeup artist on YouTube. And what was interesting with her, and tell me if this is a clear positioning change. She used to do all these makeup tutorials, and she would occasionally throw in a video of celebrities who were Instagram perfect, but in real life, they weren't like that. So she would call them out. That ended up being, it was a gradual thing. She had so much good response to that. She now does no more makeup tutorials. Everything she does is about body acceptance. Is that what you would consider a complete change in positioning?
Yeah, that would be like a natural evolution, I would guess, because especially with freelancing, consulting, advising, and so on, you sort of tend to follow what you like. And so at the moment, I'm talking about positioning, and I'm working with startups and B2B startups and startup founders. But, after 3 years or so, you want to maybe change your perspective a bit. You change your target audience. You find some new challenges and so on. And so there is a natural evolution that you're gonna be going through, because it's just life. It's yeah. But the important thing is that with these changes, your positioning has to reflect them. It has to reflect these changes. Otherwise, you just keep saying, I'm a positioning guy, but you're actually going to be, I don't know, a marketing leader in a big company or something. You're no longer a positioning guy,
Yeah. So in that case, it was a natural thing because the audience is probably very much the same. There were women who were concerned about their appearance. And then she, and a lot of them were unhappy with the way they looked. And then she started going more into that. And it turned into I just found it interesting how she does nothing about makeup now. And it's a complete switch.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned earlier about copywriting and positioning. So how can you use positioning to improve copywriting?
Yeah. So positioning, as we established before, positioning is basically all that you do before you do your marketing plan. So before you do your messaging. And so basically positioning is the basis for your writing. And so to improve messaging, to, really produce high quality results, you should really ask yourself some question to determine your product's positioning. And you're probably already doing that naturally, but I would use, the questions like maybe what's the one problem the customer is trying to solve, or, what's the dreamland that they're buying. So what's their goal? What's their wish? What do they want to accomplish? And these are questions, I refer to them as problem solution fit in my workshops, but it's basically knowing your customer's problem and transformation. So where they are now, where do they want to go? And I'm guessing you have something similar in copywriting. And then obviously the question, for example, how is this product different to everything else out there? So what's your differentiation? Differentiation is basically, it's the one single most important thing in positioning. So how can we eliminate the competition? How do we make the competition irrelevant?
It's like a value proposition. I mean,
yeah. So that's I would say that's the final one. It's what's the value that the customer is buying. So does the product help them do something faster, better, cheaper, whatever? And so these are the questions. These determine the basis of positioning, and you don't need much more to make compelling messages, I guess. So, but if you find, like we talked before, if you find a company that can answer these questions, because some of it don't. And if they can answer these questions, you have at least a strong basis for your writing, because you still have to do the writing, right? You still need to figure out your tone and like a lot of small details. Like I was impressed. I saw a post a couple of weeks ago. It was like just the punctuation. What difference does it make? Like how differently the sentence sounds when you put a different punctuation at the end of the line. And it was like, there is already so much work that copywriters have to do that they shouldn't be the ones figuring out positioning as well. Right. So, and so if the founders of the company can answer these questions confidently, then you have a good client.
Yeah. And surprisingly, a lot of them don't, like when it comes to value proposition. And my last question, so is there one thing that you shouldn't do in positioning, something maybe you see often?
Yeah, I would say what I mentioned before. So don't keep it static, because I once saw the stats somewhere. Apparently about half of the companies, I think it was about 45 or 46% of the companies fail because they fail to achieve product market fit. And that's half of them. That's half of the companies fail because they fail to achieve product market fit. And, as I said before, why do they fail? Because we all know product. We know we can all do products. We all have these ideas, but we fail to test in the market, right? Do the customers even want the solution that we are producing?
It seems logical, so it's surprising.
Yeah, it does seem logical, but the issue is that, most of it still, like most companies still do the same thing. So in the first 2 or 3 years, most of the startups come up with the products that they want to place on the market, and then they're now trying to figure out who are they going to sell the solution to. But it's the wrong way around, isn't it?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It should be the other way. So So where can people find you? They want to find out.
Yeah, I have one channel, so I'm a big fan of specificity. So I have one channel. This is LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I just launched my newsletter, so if you're interested in everything related to positioning, and I do cover some topics next to that, mostly marketing and psychology of how we buy. And yeah, so if you are interested, I do have a newsletter, and yeah, follow me on LinkedIn and ping me. I'm
Awesome.
happy to talk about positioning anytime.
Great. This has been so interesting and important information. I'm really happy that you took the time to talk to me today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions, and I'll be happy to be back anytime you want, Melinda. Thank you.
Awesome.